My name is Phil Glosius, and I'm going to moderate today's sports law panel. Before we do, we obviously have to acknowledge that the jury is supposed to come in and give a verdict on the Derek Chauvin case. If that happens, and I'm listening to it, we're going to stop sports law for a little bit and at least do some talk on it. I don't think it's appropriate to just ignore it and act like sports law is the only thing that matters here today. So we're going to get started and kind of watch for the verdict. And when the verdict comes in, we'll do a little bit of conversation on that and then go back to sports law or see how that plays out. So if that's okay, I'm going to get rolling. We have three panelists today. One is Michael Winger, who is general manager of the Los Angeles Clippers. The other is Andrea Kimball, who is general counsel of KC Sporting, the professional soccer team. And then our own Dion Kohler, who is becoming the star of amateur sports in this country. She testified in front of Congress for the NIL, name, image, and likeness, and was just named to oversee or co-chair the committee that's going to look into the U.S. Olympic movement and make suggestions. The format's going to be pretty simple. As most of you, if any of you have me in sports law, you know I can go on for 2 hours asking questions. I hope that you will ask questions in the chat. I will monitor the chat and integrate all your questions into the performance. So if you are interested in doing something in the chat, just go ahead and do it, and I will pick it up and ask questions. First, I'm going to start with everybody and ask them to do just a brief how did you get into sports kind of overview, because I know most law students at least have an interest in that one to start off with. Michael, why don't you begin? How did you get into this?
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you very, very much for having me. I know today's a particularly challenging day. Looks like, by the way, the judge just took his seat behind me. You wanted to pause for a moment. If not, I can go on.
Hold on. You have it? All right. Let's pause, Michael. Hold on.
You got it.
The verdict's coming in.
You seated? Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict.
Yeah.
Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, count 1. Court file number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019.
Okay, well, that's in, and he's guilty on first 3 counts. I don't know if there are any more. I figured that was enough for us. I think we can applaud the decision. This is obviously a critical time for police relations and rethinking how police do things. And at least I agree with the CNN commentators that this is probably a good start on reconstructing how we teach police to do things and how we have to acknowledge the faults of the past. I don't think he would have been convicted if this was 5 or 6 years ago. So I think this is almost an historic moment here in terms of race relations in police. And I'm glad that we can at least recognize it. Anybody? I guess I was worried I'd have more to say if it was not guilty, because I think that would have been considerably more controversial. But if anybody wants to talk in the chat or tell me anything. Okay, something has happened. Dion, you want to comment, or you think we can go on to sports law?
No, I think I was glad that, for the participants, the students and the others who are with us, I was glad that we could pause and we could collectively, take in this moment together. I have to say, I was holding my breath. I mean, even with the testimony as it was, even with video, the fact that we were all waiting and holding our breath and didn't know how this was going to go, I think shows you how far we have to go for reform in this country. But I'm glad to see that justice was served.
Mr. Bean, I don't think I can unmute you. I think you have to ask your question in the chat. So raising your hand isn't going to help. That's the problem with the webinar. It's not like Zoom. So if you want to do something, you got to do it in the chat, and I'll repeat it. Christine, that's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Nope. Okay. Mr. Bean, if you want to write something in the chat, you got to do it now, because if not, we're going to go ahead and move on to, I don't know why it's appearing. Okay.
Told that the chat is disabled, for which I also apologize. So Q&A is the way to do it.
Okay. Mr. Bean, I can see on Q&A, it says I am right now, so I don't. Right. Obviously, we're having a few technical problems here that we don't know how to deal with. At least I don't know how to deal with. Let me correct that. I don't know how to deal with. All right. Christina, are you seeing a question from Jonathan Bean? Because I'm just seeing I am right now. Oh, there we go. I think it's a step in the right direction. Nice to see justice system work in a logical manner. Right. Clearly wrong. Nice to see justice system acknowledge that. I agree with you 100%. Okay, so that was typing into the question and answer function. I can read it, so that's the way to go if you want to ask any more questions. Michael, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay, great. Why don't we go back then to sports law, and I'll do a sigh of relief and go back to sports law, the verdict. Michael, how did you get started in this crazy business?
Certainly. Let me apologize at first. I am one of the victims of probably my own technical difficulties. My camera suggests that it's working, but for some reason my face is not showing up. I don't know how to fix that problem. It's probably for the best. In any event, how did I get into sports law? Well, going into undergraduate school, I very badly wanted to be a sports agent, particularly in baseball. And I had the great fortune of reaching out to the right person at the right time. I was one of those young people who found an opportunity to connect with somebody who didn't know me and had no reason to know me.
It's called a stalker, isn't it?
It is called a stalker. That's right. If it's not done appropriately, it's stalking. If it's done appropriately, it's professional outreach. There was a renowned sports agent giving a talk at my undergraduate school. I went to Miami of Ohio, and in anticipation of his visit, I emailed him. It was a rather long, presumptuous, and probably juvenile email, but he is such a compassionate and giving person. He actually responded anyway. And so that email began a relationship, and through continued dialogue, resulted in me working with him, or for him, full time in the development of a negotiations consulting firm specializing in just sports related negotiations that was based in Baltimore. And that opportunity created connections within sport, predominantly in basketball, and helped me connect with another mentor of mine, Danny Ferry, who was at the time I met him, the assistant general manager of the Spurs. This is back in the late summer of '03. And we too developed a relationship in the spring of 2005. He took over as general manager of my hometown Cleveland Cavaliers and invited me to come work for him. And so I did. And so I guess the short story is I sent an unsolicited email to the right person at the right time. And as luck would have it, it led to a relationship. And in this business, those matter.
Okay. Andrea, why don't you tell about your starting in the fun and sun of San Diego and getting into this Kansas City job?
That's right. So after graduating from law school, where I had Professor Closius as my sports law teacher, I thought I wanted to be a sports agent. I was a college athlete and always loved sports. And I then, right out of law school, took a 2-year federal clerkship in sunny San Diego that then led to a job at a big law firm where I started doing general litigation, employment, and then representing celebrities up the road there in LA, and doing licensing. I soon developed a specialty in intellectual property litigation. So did a lot of contracts and licensing and patent and trademark disputes and copyright stuff. And then I, for family reasons, moved back to the Midwest, here to Kansas City, and took a job with another large law firm where I continued to do IP litigation and general litigation and class actions, and kind of honed my toolkit of trying to be as broad and generalist as possible, because I always wanted to get back into sports. And it took me a while. I was almost 20 years out of law school when I got this general counsel job, but an opportunity came up, and as Michael said, relationships matter. I knew one of the owners of the team who asked me to come and interview for the job, and I was able to sell the owners of the soccer team here on my skills in terms of representing entertainment clients and celebrities, and also did some work for sports teams and players when I was out in San Diego, and they offered me the job. And so I've been on this path here as the vice president and general counsel of a men's MLS soccer team called Sporting Kansas City since early 2016. So this is my 5th season with the club.
Andrea, do you think it's ironic that Michael's become a GM of a basketball team, even though we both know you would have destroyed him on the court if you ever played one-on-one or in any other way?
I don't know Michael's skills, so I can't speak to it. But yeah,
I know both your skills. I can speak to that. I can speak to that one. Dion, how do you Michael's staying silent, so we'll say he agrees with that. He knows that's true. Dion,
my basketball idol is Charles Oakley. He's the only way I know how to play.
I can attest to that. Dion, how do you get to become on a congressional committee that is overseeing the reform of the U.S. Olympic movement?
Well, I was an amateur athlete. I was an athlete growing up, so I was always interested in sports and came into sports like many people do that way. At my firm well, Professor Closius, the NFL was one of our clients, and so I had some exposure that way. But in terms of making it my area of scholarly interest, I had always thought that Olympic movement sports in the United States was under-theorized and not thought about as much as it should be. That is, there are a lot of choices as to why we've kept our Olympic movement private. But I started writing about it and continued to write about it and continued to watch these issues. And I've been very lucky that they have, at some point now, policymakers are interested in making some changes and doing something about it. So.
Okay, Michael, I'm back. What's currently on your desk? Give me a sense of some of the stuff that you are working on, kind of on a daily basis right now.
this season's different than most other seasons. I typically deal with puzzles and riddles, that sort of thing, on a regular basis. This one's obviously been considerably more complex on account of COVID. All of the, oh, I've been asked to start my video. Hold on one second. Let's see if this works. Oh, okay. All right. Hold on. Let's see what we got here.
Oh, we got Andrea. Somehow you got Andrea's video working.
Okay, let's see. This is not a Halloween mask.
Look at this. All right.
Hey!
Michael Winger.
We did it. We did it.
Good job.
All right.
And you got Andrea on too. That's like a double victory.
Very cool.
All right.
Nice job, Christine. So on my desk right now, everything's considerably more complex than it otherwise would have been on account of COVID, mostly related to travel, the game schedule, player travel. We test every single day. We have certain limitations on when we can be in the building, when we can get on an airplane, how soon in advance of a game we can show up to the arena. And in addition to that, we're operating with about a 60% crew. And so there's more work and fewer people to do it. That presents all kinds of little problems, mostly logistics. So that aside, what would I ordinarily be working on right now at this point in the season? We just got through the trade deadline. We did make a trade. We brought in Rajon Rondo in exchange for Lou Williams. And that's been going pretty well so far. Obviously have a great deal of appreciation for Rajon being here. Now it's basically just sort of managing the roster, managing the staff in anticipation of the playoffs, which will start in about a month. And then there too will be more reintroduction of COVID rules, health and safety protocols. We'll have to figure out exactly who can travel, who can't travel, what we can do with our arena. We just let fans into our building. What is today? Tuesday? So Sunday was our first game with fans. Yeah. And I think we had about 1,500 fans. Staples holds about 19,000. So we're operating on a little less than 10%. But that's it. I mean, it's,
are you doing any law? You think you're doing any law, or are you pretty well just doing all sports at this point?
I would say at this point in my career, I'm not. For the first, probably for the first 12 years of my career, my 5 years with the Cavaliers and my 7 years with the Oklahoma City Thunder, I started doing a lot of law, whether it was player contracts, staff contracts, immigration, some employment matters. Every now and then you have to get involved in some kind of a what's what I'm looking for? Some kind of a civil, you have to participate or at least support somebody who's involved in some kind of a civil dispute. So I would work on those things. And then as my career progressed within basketball, my responsibilities within the construct specifically of law really wound down. And now I don't do it. And I mean, other than just how the brain operates in respect of, those puzzles and riddles I talked about, I don't do much law, if any. But let me say for the record, I do none because I'm certainly not licensed to practice any.
There you go. Andrea, how about you? What's on your desk?
So currently on my desk is a lot of contracts. By the nature of Major League Soccer, we're a unified entity system. So we meaning the team owners here in Kansas City, own shares in Major League Soccer in the LLC that governs, that's the governing body. And then of course there's FIFA and the rules we have to watch there. But every sponsorship agreement we reach with, let's say, Coca-Cola goes to the league for approval. So I manage that flow. I also do routine contracts like, the toilet paper contract for the stadium and just mundane things like that. I also do immigration work because we have a lot of foreign players, a lot of European players in particular. So getting them in the country has been a real struggle with COVID. And the delays and the quarantine and all the protocols we've had to do with our players. Of course, I do HR issues and employment stuff that comes up. And lately, I've been spending a lot of time, like Michael, on COVID-related issues. You know, we had some furloughs of people, and we've been able to play. And with reduced capacity at our stadium, we have our first home game. Our season just started last weekend. Our first home game, we will have fans in attendance, and we did last year as well. At most of our games, we were at a 30% max capacity. Towards the end of last season, we started at 18%. This weekend, we will have about 48%, and that's involved a lot of dealing with the local jurisdictions to see what they will allow and what protocols we have to do. And everybody who sits in particular sections either brings a vaccine card or a proof of testing negative that day, or I think it's within 48 hours, or they can be tested on the spot. So there's a lot of logistics there to get people in the building. But we consider ourselves lucky because so many other states did not allow any fans in attendance, and we've had fans in attendance all last season as well. So we got really lucky there, working with the governor's office in Kansas. What else is on my desk? A lot of safe sport issues, because the Safe Sports Act is, the goal of that is to prevent another Penn State or a U.S. gymnastics situation. So we have had to train every player, every staff member, anyone who deals or interacts with anyone under 18 years old. And since I manage the legal issues from our academy system, which is age 12 on up to our first team, we have a lot of people who interact with minors. So we've had to train, all the coaches, all the front office people, and also the host families, where we do kind of like a hockey billeting system where players come from around the country or other parts of the world and live in a host family here in Kansas City. So we've even had to train those people, and that training takes up a lot of my time.
Yeah, Andrew, do a little bit of that. I know we've talked about it before. I didn't realize, and I don't think many people do. You're a professional sports team, but then you also take in a club team for kids, basically, right? I mean, the Kansas City sporting thing you mentioned quickly, but it's like 12-year-olds all the way up to people who hope to be on your team professionally, right? So you're managing a whole kids academy of sport in addition to the professional team.
Yeah, which has very unique challenges and issues. It's modeled after the European system where, like, Barcelona will have their academy to develop players. And in order for us to compete, we're a small market here in Kansas City. And there are, coastal soccer teams like LAFC or the New York Red Bulls that have a lot more money than us. And even, Austin, the newest expansion team. So we have to develop our homegrown players, and there's particular rules with homegrown players. And to do that, we recruit, and then we develop, those kids along through the system. They'll come here to live if they're not local, and they'll stay sometimes from age 12 on up to the second team, which is the USL team or the minor league team. And then, we have more players right now signed to our first team than any other club in Major League Soccer. I think we have 8 that we have developed through the homegrown system.
I'm also noted that both of you mentioned immigration. I suspect that 10 years ago or 15 years ago, that would not have been the case. But I guess in both your sports, that's a major issue, right? Is getting foreign players in and keeping control, and COVID and immigration problems and all that. Yeah, didn't think about that. Good. All right, Michael, do me a favor. Talk for a minute about salary cap and trades and stuff. Are you doing the trades at this point? When you got Rondo, that's you, right? Doing all the details. I know you were the cap guy. Do you now have a cap guy? Is that? Talk to me for a minute about how that all works. When you want to do a trade, how do you have to balance the whole, do I want the player with, can I fit the player into the structure and the cap and stuff like that?
The hardest part about the question you asked me is when you said for a minute. So that's probably a semester-long answer, which I'd be happy to do. I'm looking for a side gig. We have a soft cap. So there's basically no cap, soft cap, hard cap. Those are the 3 options, fundamentally speaking. We operate under a soft cap. And so we have a salary cap limit per team. It's the same number for every team. It's a pretty porous cap insofar as if you qualify for certain exceptions, you can exceed the cap and then you are now subject to the luxury tax. We have a second cap. We call it colloquially the hard cap. And if you use some of those exceptions to exceed the cap, you are then subject to the hard cap, which is not exceedable. You cannot go above the hard cap if you trigger the hard cap. If you do not trigger the hard cap, you can continue to use certain lesser exceptions to keep going up, 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 and then you're just paying a recidivist luxury tax, which can get very expensive very quickly. And so we are governed to a certain degree by a capped system. In the event that you qualify to exceed the cap, so long as you don't trigger the hard cap, you can essentially spend into eternity, which
Okay,
some teams just have.
when you decide to let a player go and pick up a player, are you making that call, or is the coach making that? I mean, exactly how are you
choosing the actual player?
right?
Yeah, so I report to our team president, and our team president oversees, or I shouldn't say oversees, our team president is responsible for the coaching staff and the management staff. Our head coach, of course, leads the coaching staff, and I lead the management staff. And so he makes the final decision on players, all of them, every single one of them. He certainly gets input from management and from the coaches. He loves really a sort of a global perspective on the roster, and we all have a voice. But to answer your question specifically, I am not choosing which players come and go. I am opining, I am providing guidance, as is the head coach, and then ultimately our team president is making that decision.
Okay, and then how about, are you weighing in on the cap implications, or do you have to
Sure,
pre-clear that before it even gets to the president?
No, so yes, I am predominantly overseeing all of our, we call it strategic planning, and it's effectively managing the roster through the lens of the cap dynamic. And so all of that runs through our group here in the front office. I oversee that group, and whether it's a contractual matter or if it's a salary cap matter, all of that gets vetted through contemporaneously with the evaluation of the player. And so all of these things are happening concurrently, and it's all the same people doing it. And so even though we have various different disciplines and various different groups who are performing or undertaking those disciplines, we all participate very collaboratively on all matters. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I got a question from the chat though. How have contract negotiations changed in the load management area, whether it be regarding incentives or other contractual requirements? Yeah.
Jonathan, the negotiations themselves haven't changed. The advent of load management is probably just a professionalized way of resting players who need and deserve the rest. We have various different ways of monitoring a player's load, his performance load, and it doesn't necessarily have to be exclusively in game. It can be in practice, it can be out of practice, it can be in the weight room. We try to keep all of our players healthy for their benefit, for the team's benefit. But in terms of the negotiations, it really hasn't entered into negotiations because generally speaking, like the rest or the load management is a team desire, not a player desire.
Okay. All right, Andrea, do you do trades?
Not really, unless there's like a complicated legal issue they bring me in on, whether it be like exchange rate or there's a clause that needs to be written. Those contracts are form contracts, and the players of our team are actually employees of the league, and they send us a bill every month for the player's salary. So it's pretty standard stuff, and our assistant coaches do the trades and the scouting and all that.
Okay, good. That's what I thought you were simply. Okay, for Andrea and Dion, can we talk a minute about the changing role of women in sports? And Michael, maybe we'll get you to comment on what they say if you have anything. But Have there been are there more opportunities for women in sport? Is it growing? I know for a fact that this was 15 years ago. I mean, women in sports would be a fairly brief topic in terms of being in any kind of management position. But Andrea, you want to start? What's your perspective? Are there more opportunities for women? I certainly have noticed in sports law, I have an increasing percentage of women in my sports law classes who have an interest in doing almost anything with regards to sports and entertainment. So Andrea, why don't you go and talk first, and we'll get Dion in.
Sure. I think it's really changed. When I came out of law school in 1997, I wanted to be a sports agent. And I had two good friends in Major League Baseball that time. And they were both like, boy, we'd hire you because we know you're tough and you'd be a great agent, but we don't know that our friends would because you're a woman. And that was a wake-up call for me. The WNBA was just getting started. I think they started in 1998. And so I was thinking, who am I going to be representing if I'm going to have trouble getting male clients? So I went the firm route, and I told you the circuitous path I took to get to where I am. But I do see a lot more female general counsel. Whether I go to the Sports Lawyers Association conferences every year, there's a lot more women in sports, it seems, every year. And I know that there are there's probably 30 or 40% of the lawyers in Major League Soccer are women now, which I don't know that it's that way in every sport. I personally think soccer is a little more open-minded because it's very European. So, I go to these conferences and I hear horror stories from my colleagues that might work for an NFL team or another sports league. And they say, oh, don't you hate it when you get, woken up in the middle of the night because your player got drunk and in a fight or arrested? And I'm like, no, that has literally never happened to me. One, our coach would never tolerate it. And two, it's just kind of a different culture in soccer. We have very, European, the things I have to worry about with them is when kids come up for an autograph, that they kiss the kids on both cheeks because it's cultural. And I'm like, no, we don't do that here. Sorry. So I think it's getting better. I'm seeing more and more women in sports, but we still got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. Dion, you want to chime in on?
Yeah, I mean, I think your question can be interpreted a lot of different ways. And I think Andrea answered it really well in terms of kind of the management side and women getting involved on the legal side and working for clubs and at the professional ranks. I think there's a lot more work to be done, especially in intercollegiate sports. But I think what's really exciting, and I think we saw it during the pandemic, just an explosion, women's sports just all around, the sort of 360 view, fan interest in women's sports growing, the movement around making sure that all rounds of the NCAA women's volleyball tournament would be broadcast on ESPN, and there would be, commentary, and that would be available. That's new and that's exciting. So there's fan interest, there's women in the professional ranks in terms of management and general counsel positions, increased opportunities for women at the professional level and women's professional soccer and professional hockey. So I think what we're just seeing is a 360 kind of explosion everywhere you look in sports. Women are getting a seat at the table and getting opportunities where they didn't get opportunities. And if you think about it, I call this sort of next phase Title IX. Title IX was passed in 1972. It wasn't really enforced until the 1990s when there was a private right of action. But since that time, it's been growing and growing and growing in all areas and through all measurements. And so I think it's ultimately a good news story. And I think part of it as well is social media. Even when traditional media channels, for instance, have been blocked to women because the media deals didn't include the rights to, certain women's sports. Social media is a direct to consumer platform. And so, for instance, with the NCAA women's basketball tournament, okay, the NCAA didn't want to give women the platform that they deserved. That's fine. Women were taking it right to social media. Same thing with sports that we might think of as maybe non-revenue sports. Women's gymnastics is huge. It's huge. And women women have followings on social media. So I think it's a growth story in women's sports. I think if you're ignoring women in sports at any level in any way, you're just missing opportunities. So I think it's been really exciting. It's been one of the good things that's come out of the pandemic.
Yeah. Andre, I got bad news though. I think being an agent may be the last barrier that needs to be crossed. I mean, there's still a decent amount of resistance in the predominantly men professional sports over having a woman be their agent for all kinds of sexist reasons, but that may be the last place. Michael, you want to talk about this from your perspective? I mean, are you seeing more women coming into the NBA particularly?
Sure. Yes, we are. I would support. I don't even think it's an opinion so much as it's a fact. I don't think we're anywhere close to where we should be, quite frankly. And I don't necessarily mean the NBA. I mean professional sports in the U.S. I think that we have a very, very long way to go. But in the time that I've been in the NBA, this is my 16th season, I believe. Certainly, it has grown. We have. It's maybe bittersweet insofar as you can see the growth, but you can name the names. In other words, there's more than zero, but not enough where people are sort of lost in the shuffle. And so we certainly have a handful of female referees. We have a handful of female executives in the NBA, a handful of female assistant coaches. Some team presidents are females. Ours, for example, her name is Gillian Zucker. Our GC is a female. And you're seeing more and more starting to see more females getting the entry-level positions in the NBA that were historically given to former NBA players, which of course are men, given to the sons of the coach, the sons of the owner, the sons of the GM. You're seeing a lot of those sort of freebies not happening, and instead favoring minority candidates, including women. And in my opinion, it's still far from where we need to have it. But I guess, have I seen growth? Yes. Have I seen adequate growth? Humbly, no.
Great. Again, I remind everybody in the audience, if you want to ask something, I think the chat is up and working now, or you can go through the Q&A thing. I can see it. For both of you guys, Andrea and Michael, question, in MLS or NBA, are there any rules like the NFL with the Rooney rule that requires a certain number of minority candidates be interviewed for different positions? Andrea, why don't you start, and then we'll go back to Michael.
Sure, there is in regards to high-level coaches. So if you're hiring a head coach or an assistant, one of the main assistants, it wouldn't apply to like an athletic trainer or support staff for the coaching side, but it does apply to our coaches and their choices they make. So we do have to interview a diverse slate of candidates before hiring new coaches.
Michael?
I'll give you the short answer, no. The long answer, no.
Okay, thank Dion. How are you going to reform the Olympic movement? What do you think the major issues are going to be as you start on this, what is it, like a year-long committee? Is that what it's supposed to be? And why don't you tell us a little bit about the committee and about what you think is going to happen at the end of the day here on Olympic sports?
Well, the commission was formed as a result of the Empowering Olympic and Paralympic Movement Act. It was passed into law last fall. And as part of that reforms, it was building on the Safe Sport reforms that grew out of the USA Gymnastics scandal and the Safe Sport Act that I'm thrilled to hear Andrea talk about. I wish more people knew about their obligations under Safe Sport and were training, but they're not all as professional as she is. So the Empowering Olympic and Paralympic Athletes Act of 2020 last fall set up, among other things, a commission to study certain issues, and this statute breaks out probably 10 different areas that we need to look at in terms of the functioning of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, inclusion, diversity issues, safe sport issues. It's a very, very long list. And I think what it is, after you look at all the different categories, is it's almost a top to bottom review of how we're running the Olympic movement in the United States. And for people who don't know, when we talk about the Olympic movement, it's not just Olympic athletes. It certainly is Olympic athletes in the sense that the elite program is a very important part of the US Olympic movement and sort of getting athletes to that top stage. But the Olympic movement and national governing bodies for sport in the United States, anybody who was a kid who played sports was a member of a national governing body. And so this is really a structure that goes from the top down, down to grassroots sports. And one of the charges that the USOPC has is to stimulate participation, support participation in grassroots sports. So this commission is really going to be, and was charged by Congress to be a sort of study and a rethink of, is this entity and is this structure working for what we need in the 21st century? The commission itself, our work is not underway yet. I can't comment on any work. It's not underway. We are not legally able to operate yet because the enabling legislation did not include the appropriation. And so there will be a second piece of legislation that will include an appropriation, and then we'll get sworn in and start our sort of investigations and hearings and produce, ultimately, we have to produce a report for Congress. But the only time this has been done was back in the 1970s with the commission that ultimately led to the formation of the modern United States Olympic Committee. So this is a huge opportunity, and I think it's been decades in the making, and I think we're going to see some real proposals for reform.
Okay. Michael, Andrea, you're both in Olympic sports. Do you have players that try out for the American Olympic team, or are you not involved in that at all? I mean, is that just handled by, U.S. Olympic Team America kind of stuff? Andrea first, do you do anything with that when it's Olympic year?
I'm not really involved. If they are called up, they really have to go, which was something that I did not know. Same thing with other national teams when they call our players, like let's say the Honduran national team wants one of our players. We can't say no. We have to allow them to go per FIFA rules. And if that player stays in Kansas City and plays in the game, the sanctions are huge. You forfeit the game. You could forfeit many games. They're really strict rules. We had players on the national team the last round when the U.S. did not qualify for the World Cup. And we have a former player who will now likely go to the Olympics, Eric Palmer Brown, because he's young enough. But the soccer rules are really weird in terms of who can play, and you have to be under a certain age limit, and then they allow a couple veterans, and I'm not all that up to speed, but we do allow our players to go because we really have to.
Because you have to.
Yeah.
Michael, you do anything?
Sure.
You're going to have Clippers are going to want to be on the Olympic team, right? Or are going to be at least selected to be in the group that tries out,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have or have had historically international players who were invited to participate with their national teams. We have American players who have been and are likely to be invited to participate for USAB. It is always the player's choice as to whether he participates with his national team or not. We are not allowed to interfere. We are not allowed to discourage. But sometimes the player wants, like a health plan, for example. He might say, I do want to play for my national team, but can you provide for me my off-season conditioning plan so that I'm adhering to this while at the same time participating with the national team? We'll, of course, provide them with that. We may provide somebody from our performance and medical team to travel with that player, maybe somebody from our front office to travel with that player. But we support the heck out of them participating with their national teams. We think it's important for them. We think it's important for their families. We think it's important for their countries. We think it's important for their development as people. And I just, organizationally, we very strongly encourage our players, if invited, to participate.
And that won't conflict though with your season, right? The Olympic run is between anything you're doing. It's after the finals and before the beginning, but yours would be in season, right, Andrea? I mean, your people get called up, they got to lead a team, right? Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I thought. Okay, I got to ask you, intellectual property. Is this something that you think is going to continue to be big in terms of, if I have to ask you what you think is going to be on your desk 5 years from now, is it going to be intellectual property? Is that the big thing that's growing? Or do you just not even do anything with that? You just, sign that all over to, whatever IP people you have? Andrea, I'll start with you because your background is in intellectual property.
Yes, I think it is going to be huge. We recognized a couple of years ago here at Sporting Kansas City that fan data is really the new currency. Knowing everything you can know about a fan really allows us to target market. So, stadiums are developing beacons where you walk past and Phil Closier's phone rings saying, hey, that sweatshirt you just passed is 50% off. Or wouldn't you like a hot dog and a beer? Go to section 7, or automatically order it from your phone, which we now have, and it will be delivered to your seat. So using this new technology is really blowing up the sports world. And there are a lot of fan engagement apps like Fan 360 and other core other software programs that really help sports teams get into the mind of the fans and really are really amazing, especially used by our marketing teams. But the thing that I think troubles me the most of what we're going to see coming down the pike is data privacy. And that worries me every day, because not only do we have to fear that someone's going to hack into our system and take all our season ticket member financial data off our system, but also that anyone we reach out to for ticket sales or whatever marketing purpose, that we are data compliant with all the privacy laws. And so we have to make the decision, do we want our website accessible by people in England, because those laws for data privacy and what you have to tell them and what you're doing with the data and all the disclosures are so off the charts, complicated and different in every jurisdiction. Same thing with California and Oregon and some other states. And so reconciling all those different privacy laws, in a way that we can do business as a sports team that plays all over is really, really difficult and getting more difficult every day.
Michael, IP, you do it? You deal with it?
I don't deal with it at all. I wouldn't put I would not advise anybody to put their trust in me to manage an IP issue.
Okay.
I do know that organizationally, it is something that we spend a tremendous amount of time and resources on. I don't see it hitting my desk in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Other things, yes. IP, probably not.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating about using your phone data to tell you, what you should buy and send coupons and all that. It's coming. Andrea, we got
data privacy. That is a huge frontier. Not necessarily. Well, in addition to user data privacy, player data privacy, specifically health data, and there is a lot of health data being collected. Thus far, the spirit of collection has been very, very, very much exclusively for the benefit of the player. But at some point, there's going to want to be some form of ownership of that data, and that could become an issue. We test a lot of things and we track a lot of things. The owner of the data is currently, I think, unknown, and we can use it for game planning purposes, that sort of thing. But there are certainly multiple layers of use for that kind of thing, and I think that in the next handful of years, that's going to become a hot button.
again, is that you as a GM, or is that more the coach looking at it? I mean, do you track?
Both. Our group, the front office group, is sort of the group that is responsible for collecting, analyzing, and producing the data. Let's just take something rudimentary like lineup data. A certain collections of 5 players play well together. Certain different collections of 5 players don't play well together. You have to go figure out why. And it could be something as simple as the speed at which 3 of the 5 players move versus the other 2 players. Well, at what point does that become a detriment to the 2 players who don't move as fast as the other 3 players? And with now that speed data or that mobility data, does that somehow become health related data and not usable to create lineups or matchups? Not currently, but could you foresee if you were representing an athlete that was sort of just generally slow, but once that player got into the half court was a very effective player, you might not want to broadcast that if it's not perceptible to the eye.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
track all of that. Our players wear, a stat sport, almost sports bra under their jersey. And we know where they've been every minute of the game, how fast they were going. We know their heart rate when they're taking a penalty kick. And then you think about when that player is being traded, how is that data potentially monetized? Or, when we don't know who owns it, wouldn't you like to know, how fast the player's heart was beating with a free throw with 2 seconds to go? We know all that information. Or if they have a heart condition or something. So it's really the unknown frontier, the data ownership of player data.
So if a player went out on a bender the night before a game, literally got no sleep, was out sleeping, partying and all that stuff, and then, shows up game time, would you know that with the medical data you have on him? The University of Michigan does. I know that because we had a University of Michigan person show up and say, yeah, we know what they're doing all the time. We bring people in all the time and say, how dare you not get any sleep the night before a big game and all that. Michael, you're saying no.
Yeah, we would know something like that.
Okay.
We don't, I mean, to some extent, we're dealing with professionals, and there's a certain level of trust inherent in being a professional athlete. But there's also a certain level of deference given to these guys who are adults. And, we don't track that sort of thing. To the extent that we track anything that is maybe physically inherent, a heart rate, things like that, it is 100% exclusively for just the health and well-being of the player, which is how we manage load. And so
Practice game and all,
like we manage steps, we manage the force of the steps that a player applies. We do manage sustained heart rate. And the whole goal there is just to know when to shut a guy down for a day. When do you give a guy the day off? That's the goal for us.
Okay. Andre? I can't read your face. So
Sure. We would know that right now, what a player did, because we're tracking our players for COVID reasons. And so, there's the bracelet that they wear. And so we know if they've come into contact with anyone that could be deemed an exposure, we knew to shut them down and quarantine them. Typically, we don't, unless our medical people know, like from the blood oxygen level or something. I don't know.
I got a question from somebody in the crowd here. Andre, I guess this is for you about the new Super League in soccer being formed in Europe. Will that affect American soccer at all, or any comments on the Super League? Good idea, effect here, or any thoughts?
I just heard about it last night, so I don't really know the parameters. I think 14 teams want to break off and form their own league. It wouldn't have a huge impact on us. I think it would have a huge impact on European soccer for sure. And I generally, from what I know, I don't think it would be a good thing. But, there's been rumors of MLS merging with La Liga, the Mexican league, and forming a North American soccer league. So I think if it were Mexico talking about doing that, it'd have more of an impact. So TBD, I can't really see a huge impact right now with that merger.
Do you take players from those top teams to play in MLS?
We do.
Would that make it more difficult and more expensive to do if they suddenly start developing a ton of money and the salaries go flying up? Would that be a problem?
The salaries already are much higher over there for players than we pay here in MLS. So, we now have become a buyer-seller league. We didn't used to be. People used to say, oh, MLS is where like David Beckham goes to play his last year before retirement, or or
Yeah.
something. That's not the case anymore because we're actually sending a lot of players off to Europe. But yes, we do mind younger players from the Barcelona Academy. We've had 3 in the last couple of years come here, and they've been great
Yeah.
signings for us.
Good. Dion, what's your call? What are going to be the big future issues in sports? What's a sports law class going to be talking about 3 or 4 years from now? That we're not talking
3 or 4 years from now. How about next year? I think it's going to be the NIL. I think intercollegiate sports, the absolute just transformation that is going to happen. Once we see what the Supreme Court is going to do, how Congress responds, states, it's just, we have a domino effect going in the states. The states are going to be laboratories on this. So I think NIL and sort of a revolution in college sports is what we're going to be talking about. And I think it's long past time.
Yeah, coming soon. All right, last thing maybe. How about gambling? I tell my sports law classes, as soon as mobile app gambling becomes a reality, which is only a matter of time, revenue is going to soar because it's going to really increase gambling a lot. We're now no longer pretending that all the professional leagues are anti-gambling. Is this anything that you guys will be involved in, or you think gambling is going to somehow become an element of anything that's going to come across your desk or not? Michael?
I do think it'll come across my desk. I do not think that I will be significantly involved in anything related to the implementation of rules or anything like that. We in the NBA have had very long-standing rules against fixing, tipping, betting, things like that among players and staff. There is expected to be an influx of significant revenue once the leagues are able to monetize those opportunities. But from our standpoint, to the extent it doesn't impact the integrity of the game, I think it's mostly going to be dealt with on, call it the business side of the house, and that is trying to figure out for ourselves how to monetize those opportunities as well.
Conjuring, gambling, yeah. MLS?
It's coming. It will be here. Here in the Midwest, there's a couple states, and it looks like potentially Kansas and Missouri will allow at some point in-stadium gambling, which is a very interesting thing that you can bet on the game you're about to watch. I think it's a huge, potential revenue upside, and most of the people that I work with have hired lobbyists to take a position on that, and it could mean a lot of money for sports teams.
Yeah, you probably don't know, it's gotten some buzz here because the Nationals have opened up a casino in the stadium. You can access the casino without having a game ticket, and then they have developed software that will enable you to bet on your phone, but only in the stadium and within like a 20-foot range outside the stadium. So it's going to be in game. I know some other people in the TV business who say the NFL is monitoring, being able to let you bet literally play by play. Who's going to catch the next pass? You think it's going to be a run? You think it's going to be a pass play? All part of this explosion when mobile betting becomes reality. So coming. Dion, gambling?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Go ahead, Michael.
I think there are, you just brought up a great point about in-game, call it micro bets, whether or not this player in this particular moment is going to make or miss this free throw. Right. And I do think that at the league level for us or for any sport, they're really going to have to figure out how to balance those opportunities, which are going to be money-making opportunities for the leagues and the teams, against cheering for the player, if you're the home team, to make the free throw. In other words, if you're going to win money by him missing the free throw, despite him being your player, there's a conflict there. And what we're not going to want, and no team would want, we don't want 20,000 Clipper fans in the arena hoping that a Clipper player misses a free throw because it's going to earn them $5. And that's going to be a real problem, I think, for all sports.
Michael, it also might be nice to know what his blood pressure is as he steps up to that line, you're back to your privacy data, right? I mean, if I'm betting on the free throw going in, I might want to know if he's really nervous before he shoots it or not. But, Dion, didn't mean to cut you off before.
No, I just think one of the things about gambling, obviously, there's the thing everybody's looking at with the pro side and how everybody's going to make money. But I think one exciting thing that gambling revenues can do at the state level is if we can take some of those revenues and pump it back into grassroots sports, we have some real opportunities to fix a lot of problems in our country in terms of participation, because increasingly sport in this country is for kids who can pay. We don't have enough grassroots sports stuff going on. And so the demographics of youth sports are really, really problematic. And so there are lots of proposals on the state level to take some of this gambling revenue and say, okay, a portion of it's going to go into funding programs so that lots more kids can try sports like ice hockey and soccer and gymnastics and swimming and all that good stuff.
Okay, I got a question from the chat. Let's take it before we go. Dion, maybe, I don't know who should answer this, but anyway, how do you see state law bans on trans athletes coming into play in the future of sports law?
Well, it is in sports law right now. And I think, it's becoming public policy. And I think what needs to be sorted out, and I think what will be sorted out is where do we draw the line in sport? And really what the debate is sex, meaning, sort of your assigned or your sort of biological gender. Is that how we draw lines in sports, men's sports and women's sports? Well, what we know from the science is that this is not binary. And so we need a better proxy for having categories of sports. Is that proxy amount of testosterone in your body? Is that proxy something else? Because I think everybody agrees that we need categories of sports so that we can get the greatest amount of participation among all people and kids, and we want it to be fair. But is it really about your assigned sex at birth? Is that really the proxy where it needs to be? And I think people recognize that is really not getting at the issues that we need to get at. The International Olympic Committee has a rule that there has to be the testosterone has to be suppressed for 2 years before you can compete at that elite level, before trans women can compete at that level. That's one rule for one context. And I think one of the things that has not worked is that the arguments about trans athletes, we have done what we do a lot of times in sports is we look at the elite level and then we take rules and impose those rules all the way down to the youth level. Do we have problems in grassroots sports with trans kids? I don't know that we have problems that need to be resolved. Does, fractions of a second make a difference at the Olympic level? We know it does. Do we know that testosterone makes a difference at the Olympic level? We know it does. We have bans on exogenous testosterone. So I think we need to get away from talking about men and women, and we need to get at the categories we're really trying to make in sports so that we have level playing fields. But these sort of culture war state statutes that are really just sort of perpetuating harm against certain groups aren't getting us where we need to be. So I think there's going to be a lot more said about trans athletes and sports and really getting at the types of regulations that ensure level playing fields and not exclusion of people for the purposes of simply excluding.
Okay. We're a little over time, and I think we've got all the questions answered from the chat. So thank you all for coming. It's always a great time to talk to you, and thanks for sharing all the insights, and we'll be in touch. Everybody in the audience, thanks for being around.
Thank you.
Have a good night.